Which teams in the Power 5 conferences will make the biggest jump from last year? From Dartmouth, Massachusetts. You know, we don't talk about the Ivies enough now that I think about it. I have no hot takes on how Dartmouth is going to do this year, but I do have some takes, you can decide whether they're hot or not, on how the likes of Miami will do this year. Now, this is not rocket science. They were 5-7. So as producer Jesse told me when he looked at this list of teams earlier today, well, they can't really get much worse, can they? Pretty much. So how big will the jump be? I guess is part two of the unknowable here. Miami goes 5-7 last year. I think most of you remember they got drugged by Middle Tennessee, Duke. They got blown out by FSU. We don't need to relitigate all that. They were a bad team on the field. They had several, as a result, true freshmen that have either already enrolled or are a part of this signing class that is graded inside the top 10 that I think will be immediate contributors. And not only that, especially if you look at the offensive tackles they're bringing in, there are high school offensive tackles, like kids who were playing high school football this past fall who were committed to Miami or who were about to commit to Miami that I think as seniors in high school would have been upgrades over some of the pieces Miami and Mario Cristobal had to go to war with this past fall. That's what you inherit. That is what it is. So they started 3 quarterbacks last year. I just felt offensively they were so out of sync. I think everyone saw that, especially everyone in the Miami fan base. That's why a lot of folks are still looking around wondering if the totality of the upheaval has concluded down there. And that's a really unnecessarily convoluted way of saying, are there going to be more staff changes? And I tend to believe there may be. So we're talking about Josh Gaddis. We're talking about the offense coordinator. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. That's what we're talking about. I had producer Jesse look something up, a.k.a. Stats and Info. I'm naming him more and more these days. I said, hey, they didn't run the ball very well this year, right? He said, no, they really didn't. Well, give me their leading rusher in every Power 5 game this year. Here they are. 85 yards, 57 yards, 19 yards, 27 yards, 63, 114, 64, 118, 22, 72. So that's not good enough. Not anywhere near good enough. They're bringing in a high 4-star running back, couple of big-time offensive tackles this class. We'll talk about them later. Miami, certainly when we look at the 2023 schedule, they opened with Miami of Ohio. They got A&M coming to Coral Gables, finally. And Bethune-Cookman week 3, at Temple week 4, and then they start conference play at Florida State. Actually, the entirety of the conference schedule is not even decided yet, so we'll see when they play Florida State. But Miami, that's team 1. Team number 2, this one's also not all that difficult to figure out. Certainly, don't you have to expect Oklahoma to make a big jump this year? Oklahoma, this past year, goes 6-7. And they lost a really good bowl game now. The Cheez-It Bowl delivered in all facets, from mascot to delivery and presentation to actual game on the field. 35-32, it was FSU at the bell that won it. It obviously went really bad in year 1 for Brent Venables in Oklahoma. We told you the other night, they were, I think it was like sub 500 for the first time this millennium. And there were a number of statistics you had to go back a long way to find a comparison for. They're well on the way to replenishing the roster. They've done a really good job of balancing traditional recruiting, transfer portal. They have plus 4,000 odds to win the college football playoff, but second best odds in the Big 12. So there's that. And that conference has been known to spit out a surprise or two over the past several seasons. I'm interested in the fact that they have a top 10 recruit or top 5 recruiting class actually as of today, and a top 10 portal class. And they have Jackson Arnold, possibly pound for pound my favorite quarterback in this cycle. In fairness, we got to see him up close out at the Elite 11 and got to know him a little bit. So I just happen to believe he's got the right stuff to come in there and compete for a starting job right away. And here's the thing about that. It's kind of a blessing that if he wins the job, it's because he was good enough. And if he doesn't win the job, it's probably because he wasn't good enough. It's just because Dylan Gabriel beat him out. Dylan Gabriel, by the way, is still there. Quarterback health, obviously, was paramount coming into this past year. They didn't have it at all times, and their season went off a cliff as a result. Oklahoma, 6-7 last year, certainly going to improve on that, I think, by leaps and bounds. Let's go to the Big Ten, and let's talk about Nebraska. Nebraska goes 4-8. We got a wild prediction later in the show, by the way. Wild prediction that involves Nebraska and Kansas. I'm going to have to eat my words on the boldness scale I put on one of your predictions, but I remember Matt Rule at Baylor. That's why I'm so confident that Nebraska, even in year 1, is going to massively upgrade. They do not have Ohio State this upcoming year. They do not have Penn State this upcoming year. They have Michigan at home this upcoming year. And I have this very, very strange fascination with Jeff Sims and what he could be there. Now, it could be that he doesn't even win the starting quarterback job. Even I will admit it is January, so it's a little early still to figure that sort of thing out. But it also wouldn't surprise me if he were starting and he was doing the kind of things that we saw Adrian Martinez start to do for Kansas State this past year before he was injured and banged up a little bit. 4-8 was their record. They have the 7th best odds to win the Big Ten. This is not a prediction show wherein we're going to eye them to win the Big Ten this coming year, but I am going to look at Nebraska, and they'll probably be one of those teams, we say it every year, that is a far improved product even in October and then especially November than they were in September to open the season. Nebraska is going to be that kind of team. Also, there have been allegations out of Lee County and the surrounding areas and what would that be, East Central Alabama, that we haven't been talking about Auburn enough. And it's not that we have ignored them. It's that I haven't really known what to make of them. They finished 5-7, so I know how the season concluded. This is a segment about teams that will surprise, teams that will make a jump this season. Here's the caveat that you always have to tie into Auburn. It's not just do we expect their team to be improved. Yeah, if you ask me if they're going to get better or worse as a team, I would expect them to get better. I would expect that. But I also know that with the schedule they play, it's not like some of these others. It's not like the Nebraska schedule, where if you improve your team 17%, it could be the difference in 4 or 5 games. With Auburn, you improve a pretty good bit, you still go to LSU. And you've still got Alabama, and you go to Arkansas, you got Georgia, you go to A&M. My point is, maybe some of those teams fall short of expectation, but you can't count on that. And so Auburn could be improved, and the net result is they're 7-5 instead of 5-7, but I'm still going to put them in this segment because I'm talking about the quality of team. So let's just kind of put it that way. They have the number 3 portal class in the country right now. They've been very busy there. Most people, I think, that had observed this would expect that when Hugh Freeze came into town. Speaking of quarterbacks, I mentioned Sims up there at Nebraska a second ago. I don't think most of the country has really watched much Robbie Ashford footage, but he is a quarterback for Auburn, a guy I would expect to be the starting quarterback this fall. That's my personal call on that. He strikes me as a guy who has a skill set that has not been fully tapped into yet. And if I were to handpick a guy that's capable of tapping into that, it would probably be Hugh Freeze. So, Robbie Ashford is not one who is short for confidence. I don't think it's the most unfair criticism ever to say that he probably hasn't been put in the best position to succeed yet. Well, if that's true, I got a guy coming in there that is an offensive-minded coach that will no doubt put him in position. Now, if he's not good enough, then he'll just not be good enough. But I tend to think he is, and I tend to think that whatever potential is in him, Hugh Freeze will squeeze every ounce of it out of him this year. I also, that's a theme around the rest of their roster. How many guys on their roster were just not being properly utilized? There could be players that come out of nowhere that you had already, even as an Auburn fan, sort of dismissed and pushed to the side, and we got to get better, we got to replace this guy and that guy. Maybe you do. There could be a few guys on that roster, though, that surprise you. They do not have a murderer's row to start the season this year. That's very important. So they play UMass. They go to Cal. How about that? Auburn headed out to Berkeley, and then they play, I think, Samford. So at least they have some games where they should be a favorite before the eventual happens. And by eventual, when I'm talking about Auburn's schedule, I think you know exactly what I mean. Look, that's not an exhaustive list. The other night we did a segment, and it wasn't exhaustive, and I should have said that. So there are more teams that could surprise in 2023.
Guys, thanks for watching Late Kick. Make sure to leave a comment. I love interacting with you. But most of all, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep all of this free.